Hi friend, today I'm going to be reviewing and summarising the book Whole, Rethinking the Science of Nutrition by Dr. Colin Campbell, the author of the China Study. I'm going to give you the main takeaway messages from the book, as well as some of the most poignant insights, so that you can make a decision about whether this book is right for you. And I think the core fundamental question of this book that it's really trying to answer is, if a whole food plant-based diet is really healthy for us, and if there is science showing that that's the case, why don't you really hear about it from mainstream health organisations, from charities, from non-profits, from doctors, from government agencies? Why are you hearing about it from YouTubers or a handful of plant-based doctors? If you've wondered the answer to that question, this book tries to provide the answers. So with that said, let's dive right in. Welcome to the channel. I'm Dr. Ryan Williams, your host and the founder of Growing Pure, where I help you make vegan cooking and health fast, simple, and mind-blowingly tasty. So let's talk about this book Whole. The author is Dr. Colin Campbell, and he's well known as a vocal proponent of a whole food plant-based diet for good health. Dr. Campbell is perhaps most well known as the author of the China Study, which was a huge academic research project looking into the effects of nutrition on health outcomes. I've not actually read the China Study yet, but it is on my to-read list. So if you would like me to review that, please let me know in the comments. So what is Whole all about? I'd say there are three core parts of this book. The first one is really a critique of the modern healthcare system. Dr. Campbell's pointing out some of the flaws and providing evidence that a whole food plant-based diet really has its place, or should have its place, in modern healthcare, and that isn't really happening currently. The second part of the book is a discussion between two opposing, potentially, research paradigms, particularly as it pertains to nutritional research, that of reductionism and, on the other hand, wholism. And the third part of the book is really trying to explain why whole food plant-based nutrition hasn't made it into the mainstream of healthcare, even though there is sufficient scientific evidence that, in Dr. Campbell's view, it certainly should be. So when it comes to modern medical care, I think the first thing that the book tries to tell us and points out is that it's not really in the business of keeping healthy people healthy and preventing them from getting disease. It is in the business of taking sick people and trying to either stop them getting any more sick or trying to cure them. So there is data to back this up, but you really only need to think through it yourself. When do you or people you know go and see the doctor or go into a hospital? Is it when you're healthy, but you're trying to optimize yourself or prevent future illness? Not really. It tends to be when you've got a problem, you're experiencing some symptoms, and you would like relief from those symptoms. You want a cure, or you need some help with your medical problem. And that's where healthcare comes in. Now, modern medical care is astounding. I mean, I would think of it as breathtakingly effective when it comes to treating acute conditions. These are conditions that happen quickly and are sort of unexpected. Things like broken bones, lacerations, even bacterial infections. But Whole points out that when it comes to chronic conditions, things like high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, modern medical care rarely is able to cure the condition. It's generally an approach of managing the symptoms. And unfortunately, this doesn't tend to lead to great health outcomes. We end up with people living a poor quality of life because they're not really getting any better, they're just stopping from getting any worse. And it's true that in some instances, medical care can be really quite a risky thing when it comes to these chronic health conditions. Now, personally, I don't feel especially comfortable being critical of doctors and healthcare professionals because they do so much good in the world, I believe, and I've seen that for myself and for my friends and family. However, I think it is important to convey Dr. Campbell's message to you so that you can make your own mind up, and also to just be objective and realistic about the system that we have right now. So with that said, here's a couple of things that might elucidate this situation for us. Firstly, it might surprise you to know that the third biggest killer in the US, trailing only heart disease and cancer, are so-called iatrogenic causes. This is essentially death by doctor. Dr. Campbell points out that every year over 100,000 people are killed through the effects of prescription drugs that are designed to cure disease. And that isn't even counting accidental overdoses. Other common medical-related deaths include things like unsuccessful high-risk surgeries, patient care errors, and people catching pneumonia inside of hospitals. Now this could give a bit of a one-sided story because it's not telling you how many people were saved by their time in hospital, but still, I think we need to acknowledge here that we could be doing better. So what is Dr. Campbell's proposed solution? Well, after 60 years of research, he suggests that we're really neglecting the power of a whole food plant-based diet in treating, arresting, and even reversing some of our biggest killers. Indeed, Dr. Campbell writes in Whole, "I am now convinced that there is no healthier way to eat than a whole food plant-based diet without added fat, salt, or refined carbohydrates." He then goes on to say, quote, "If you want to live free of cancer, heart disease, and diabetes for your entire life, that power is in your hands and your knife and fork. But sadly, medical schools, hospitals, and government health agencies continue to treat nutrition as if it plays only a minor role in health." Okay, so that brings us on to the second part of this book, reductionism and wholism. So these are two, I guess, opposed or alternate paradigms for conducting scientific research and trying to get closer to the truth. And certainly in the medical field, trying to get treatments that can successfully make people healthier. So what is reductionism? Reductionism, Dr. Campbell says, really involves delving deep into the details, into the specific minutiae of the problem being studied. The classic example here is, for example, using a microscope, okay? So we're really delving in on the specific fine details to try and understand the system better. Now, reductionist research can undoubtedly be extremely powerful, and it has led to some incredible innovations and discoveries. So much so that it has become really the predominant research method used certainly in healthcare and trying to find new treatments. It's often really the simplest way of trying to study one variable. And the idea is that you focus in on one specific thing so that you can eliminate other confounding variables that might muddy the water of your results, which is logical and it makes sense. But Dr. Campbell points out that the danger with reductionism is that because you're focused in so much, you risk missing the big picture. And Dr. Campbell uses this analogy of the blind men and the elephant. All right, so here is my not very good drawing of an elephant.
That's not that bad.
And so Dr. Campbell asks us to imagine 5 blind men trying to study this elephant and figure out what it is, using their sense of touch, using their hands. And so we have one person at the trunk, another one might be at the ear, another one is at the body, another one is at the leg, and the final one is at the tail. And so as these blind men try and investigate this object, they all come away with a different idea of its attributes and characteristics. The first one thinks it's like a powerful cable. The last one thinks it's more like a rope because he's feeling the tail. The fourth one thinks it's kind of like a tree trunk. It's a big, powerful, round object. The second thinks it's more like a thin flap of material. And so all of these blind men are seeing part of the truth, but they're unable to see the big picture. And so that they can't truly understand what the object is that they're studying. And this, Dr. Campbell argues, is the problem with reductionism. So this brings us on to Dr. Campbell's proposed alternative research framework, which is wholism. So in this paradigm, we should try and look at the big picture and understand the real life, real world topic being studied. Now, this might come at the expense of precise mechanistic detail because you're not delving in so close, but what you gain is a real life understanding of the topic, and that allows you to make more useful observations and get more practical data that you can make innovations from. So in this analogy of the elephant, the holistic approach would be like someone standing back and looking at the elephant from a distance. And in this case, he can see that all 5 of these blind men were right to an extent, but they couldn't see the whole picture, so they couldn't understand the entirety of the research topic. And so when it comes to nutrition, the reductionist argument may go something like this. Oranges are good for us. There's a lot of vitamin C in oranges, and therefore the majority of the goodness of the orange is coming from the vitamin C. So if we can extract that vitamin C from the orange, or synthesize it chemically in a lab, and put it into some kind of pill or supplement, or fortify some other food with it, we're still going to get the health benefits of the orange. Unfortunately, the evidence shows that that is rarely the case. And in fact, it's not uncommon at all to find that isolated specific nutrients have a very different physiological effect from the whole food from which they came. So in whole, Dr. Campbell goes on to look at the work of Dr. Rui-Hai Liu. And I'm going to talk about it here because I think it really illustrates this point well. Dr. Liu and his team obviously saw from observational evidence that apples are a healthy food. And so they looked into why that would be. And they looked at the vitamin C content of apples. Now, vitamin C, or it's also called ascorbic acid, is an antioxidant. It has antioxidant capacity as part of its sort of chemical structure. And so Dr. Liu and his team looked at 100 grams of apple and studied the antioxidant capacity, the vitamin C-like effect of that 100 grams of apple. And they found that it had the equivalent activity to 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C as an isolated chemical. But when they extracted the vitamin C from that 100 grams of apple, they found that there was actually only 5.7 milligrams of vitamin C, not 1,500. And so what does this mean? It means that the vitamin C-like activity of 100 grams of apple was 263 times as potent as what we would expect from that amount of vitamin C that was in it, that 5.7 milligrams. And so said another way, this means that over 99% of the antioxidant capacity of apples comes from not vitamin C, or vitamin C's symbiotic relationship with other things in the apple. And so why would this be? Well, let's take a little look. So the reductionist research framework might go something a bit like this. We take an isolated nutrient that we know has a physiological effect, like vitamin C. We try and determine the physiological effect of that nutrient and then tie that to some health outcome. Now, this would be really nice and neat, but it doesn't really work because it's vastly oversimplifying the complexity of biology and nutrition. A more accurate picture, certainly when it comes to apples, would look something a bit like this. So the reality of something as simple as eating an apple would look something closer to this. Apples, like all foods really, have thousands of different chemicals, naturally occurring chemicals within them, and they all interact with one another in a unique way. So we can't just look at vitamin C in isolation when we're looking at an apple, because all of these other different nutrients within the apple are going to have a role on the physiological effect of an apple. And very likely there won't be one physiological effect, there'll be many. And we may not even be able to measure them all that accurately, okay? So we're looking at a number of different physiological effects that are going to be difficult to measure in isolation, because they're all dependent on all these variables that interact with one another. And then finally, we can't really easily measure one health outcome because the human body is a very complex biological system and a network that interacts with many things about the body and outside of it in the environment. We're looking at things like what else you're eating, the amount of sleep you've had, your hormones on any given day, the exercise you might have done, your age, all these kind of things, your genetics, are all going to play a role in the health outcomes that you're likely to see. And so Dr. Campbell argues that a reductionist study design is not fit for purpose when it comes to trying to decide what the best nutrition is for us. Instead, a holistic study design might look something a little bit more like this. Instead of taking a specific isolated nutrient, we're going to focus on a whole food, apples, and then we're going to see what all of those different nutrients in combination do. Then we're going to test this in many actual humans, real people, to see what real food does to real people. And then we're going to look at multiple different metrics and measurements and health outcomes over time to really see what the pattern is here. Now, it's true that this kind of study design is not going to give you the same kind of nitty-gritty detail as a reductionist study, but what you do get is real-life answers to real-life problems, like what should real people be eating for optimal health. And so I think the key point here really is that biology and nutrition are very complex. They can't be easily simplified because they are the product of millions of years of evolution. And so this leads to a system that resists easy reductionist investigation. And so the alternative, Dr. Campbell suggests, is holistic study designs alongside reductionist ones so that you get a broader range of evidence. And I think Dr. Campbell really sums this up nicely in this particular quotation from the book. The problem is that we are asking the wrong questions. Questions based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the holistic nature of nutrition. We're asking, how much vitamin C should we be getting? When we should be asking, what foods should we be eating to support our body's ability to maintain health? And so that brings us on to the third part of the book. Why aren't you told? Why isn't it common knowledge about the beneficial health effects of a whole food plant-based diet? Dr. Campbell puts the issue quite succinctly in this part of the book. He says, "The secret of health has been in front of us all along, in the guise of a simple and perhaps boring word, nutrition. When it comes to our health, it turns out the trump card is the food we put in our mouths each day. In the process of learning all this, I also learned something else very important, why most people didn't know this already. The medical and scientific research establishments, far from embracing these findings, have systematically dismissed and even suppressed them. The truth, how it's been kept from you and why. That's what this book is all about." So unfortunately, healthcare is a complex system of individuals, organizations, companies, government agencies that are all trying to do their best to create a healthcare system. But unfortunately, each of these has to be inherently quite self-interested. Why? Well, they need to make money. They need support, they need donors, they need customers. Because if they don't have those, the money stops coming in, they have no support, and they cease to exist, and they're not able to affect any change whatsoever in healthcare. They can't do any good. And so they're forced to play a game. And so what's the issue here? Well, I don't believe that a profit-seeking motive is inherently wrong, and I don't think Dr. Campbell does either. I think the issue comes when a healthcare system that's optimized for profitability, that profitability goal conflicts with what is in the best interests of everyday folk like you and I, what's in our best healthcare interests. When these things conflict, often profitability will come first and our health will come second. Now, this isn't any one person or company or organization's fault, it's just that they all have to exist within this system. And so what results here is a system that disincentivizes frank and honest messaging about the beneficial effects of a whole food plant-based diet and instead is more inclined to focus on the products, services that can make money for someone. So think this through and you'll see the truth of it. Let's take spinach as an example. It's a very healthy food, lovely leafy green. But who stands to make a profit from telling you to eat more spinach? Well, the farmer will make a little bit and the grocery store that sells it, but spinach is a very cheap food. It's readily available everywhere. It's not patentable. And so the profit margins are going to be pretty low on spinach. In contrast, let's imagine there was a new drug derived from a particular component of spinach. Who stands to make money from that? Well, obviously the pharmaceutical company will make a lot of money because they've put a lot of money into researching it and bringing it to market. They've got to make their money. The marketers that promote it have got to make their money. The doctors that prescribe it, they need to make money. They've got bills to pay. And then the non-profits and charities that work in healthcare, well, they need to make their money. So they'll accept industry donations to stay afloat, but that kind of means that they have to endorse industry products. And so it is possible to have a healthcare system that is optimized for health, but it's not the system that we have now, unfortunately. And this profit-seeking motive on healthcare is very subtle. And it's not like there are evil people or a conspiracy going on here. It's just that everyone has to play the game. Everyone has to play the bills. Like you have to pay your bills and I have to pay mine. Everyone does. And so the result of this is a system where people suffer and don't get the optimal information that will improve their health. And to bring this back to reductionism, Dr. Campbell argues, the current healthcare system walks in lockstep with reductionist science and reductionist study design, because that kind of study is likely to result in a product that is likely to make more money. Unfortunately, this means that the products and innovations that are created from these reductionist study designs often don't see the whole picture. So we get products that are only partially effective or could have dangerous side effects because they're focusing on the vitamin C and not the apple. However, towards the end of the book, Dr. Campbell offers a ray of hope and paints a path towards a better healthcare system that helps everyone. But who knows how long that might take. For now, the information is there and it is shared in whole for you to be able to take individual responsibility for your health. So to conclude, I think Whole is an incisive, quite controversial, but deeply elucidating book that I would highly recommend, especially if you're confused about why vegan whole food nutrition isn't recommended in mainstream health advice. Dr. Campbell answers the question quite well, I think, of why it's so hard to change health recommendations and endorse nutrition as part of our toolbox in treating disease. On the con side, I will admit it does make for a bit of a troubling read at times. And I would also say that Dr. Campbell's tone is fairly academic. So if you're looking for a light, easily digestible read, perhaps this isn't the best book. Now, to take advantage of a whole food, plant-based vegan diet for our health, we're going to need to spend some time in our kitchens. But I don't want you spending hours and hours there. I want you to get these health benefits quickly and simply. So as a free bonus for you, please click the link in the description and you will get my guide to making vegan meals that are delicious, super fast. You're going to get my top 5 time-saving hacks that will save you hours and hours in the kitchen. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.